Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Arts for Learning. Thank you for joining us for episode 4, where we will be talking about musical theater collaboration. We'll be going over all that goes into a production and how collaborating and working well with others is so important. Let's go ahead and introduce our guests for today's show. With me today, I have Glenn Ballard with Young Audiences, and we have Patty Eden, who is a musical director and Glenn's partner for 25 years. And we have Jill Swink, who is a choreographer and has worked with Glenn for at least the past 6 or 7 shows. How are we doing today, y'all?
Doing great.
Great, Paulina. Congratulations on sitting in that chair today.
It's so fun being back here, and I can't wait to see all the conversation that comes from today's episode. And thank you all so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you being here to tell us all about musical theater and working together. And like I said, I'm sure we're going to learn a lot today, but let's start off with you guys telling us a little bit about yourselves, like your specialization in musical theater, and how long you guys have known each other and worked together.
Okay, well, Paulina, I'll start by introducing these two wonderful ladies and artists that are with me today. To my left is Miss Jill Swink, and she's a dance teacher, has been a dancer herself. She was my choreographer on a number of productions that I've done over the years, and just a wonderful educator and an artist. And Patty Eden, our other guest, has been my partner for 25 years. We collaborated on at least 25 musical shows. I think there were others when you add the middle school grade level and some dinner theaters that we did, probably over 30 different collaborations. And I often said to people, she and I collaborated more than Rodgers and Hammerstein did and other famous teams. But anyway, I'm very thankful they're here today to share their wealth of experience and knowledge about musical theater collaboration.
Patty, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm from East Texas. I was born and raised in Jacksonville, graduated from SFA with a music education degree, taught in public and private school for 33 years, my last 25 at the Brook Hill School. Mr. Ballard and I started the same year and taught together as a fine arts team for 25 years. And I am now retired, and I teach private voice and piano, and I'm also the music director for my church, among other things. So trying to still stay busy in music.
Great. And Jill?
Yes, I've owned a dance studio in Jacksonville, Texas for 45 years, born and raised in Jacksonville like Patty, and have collaborated with Glenn on multiple musicals and enjoyed it immensely. My very first musical theater collaboration was with Zula Pearson at Lon Morris College, and that was extremely intimidating. I was 25 and she was a legend, but it was a lot of fun. And that kind of started my career in choreography for musical theater, and it's one of my very favorite genres. I love taking the steps and putting them on stage.
Great. And so you guys all have such amazing experiences in musical theater. So from your perspective, how do the director, the musical director, and choreographer each shape the storytelling of a musical? And then how do those responsibilities intersect, if at all, sometimes? Patty?
The key in a musical is it's a musical. And so the music, the story is important, and the actors have to be guided and directed, obviously. But if the music isn't there, it's not going to be as effective. And so the music is not only for the singers, but also obviously for the choreographer. And so working together, understanding that music and for us, it was students, what their abilities are. We took whatever their ability was and usually pushed them a little farther than whatever that was going to be. But, and then finally putting it all together on stage. There's so many out of the stage rehearsals that are going to happen before it ever gets to the stage, so that once it's on the stage, that's a little more fluid.
And Jill, as a choreographer, how do you see this?
I think I agree with Patty that the music leads the way in a musical theater production, but I love to go to that first production meeting or meeting with the director and get the vision of the director. And then I think as a choreographer, it's my goal to take the lyrics of the music, put movement to them, and bring them to life, to tell the story. I think the true intersection of all of the direction by the director, musical director, and choreography ultimately end up on the stage during production, and they bring it all to life. I mean, it's all sets, it's costumes, it's the whole concept. And a lot of times I take my initial direction from the director to see where are we going? What's the story? Where are we going? And have to do some back work myself if I do not know the play that well.
And Glenn, how do you see it as a director seeing everything?
Well, musical theater is not just a play, it's a spectacle. And so, you have something written to tell a story using compelling and memorable songs, and also what we call production numbers. And those are the high energy movements, the dance sequences that involve usually the ensemble on stage. But the music and dance make the program more visually appealing. And I think the music and usually the lyrics of the song allow the actors to give some much needed emotion. And so it's a package, and the collaborators who bring those pieces together have to have a good relationship, which we did for many years. I'm very thankful for that. When you talk about the intersection of these three art forms, the script or the story usually dictates that at some level because the songs are interposed and the dance is usually at a pivotal moment, maybe a moment of high conflict in the story, or maybe it's a time of resolution. And those parts of the story usually happen at the end of a scene or the end of an act. And it's like the big song and dance number is like an exclamation point, right at the end of the scene that leaves the audience gasping, hopefully, and wanting more. So it's really a fun, gratifying experience when the work of many hours and many weeks, as they have said, comes to fruition on the stage.
Yeah, and I personally love musical theater, but my place in it is the audience. I usually just see the end product. So it's so cool to learn about like everything that goes into the process of making the end product. So this is really enlightening to hear about. And again, something that I love about the arts are that it's a place to express yourself. And I think sometimes even take creative liberties. But I think on rare occasion, you might see something different from other people about what is an expression or like an artistic expression. So how do you guys work through creative disagreements while keeping these roles but also keeping in mind the end product and what's best for the show? Patty, do you want to start us off?
I think one of the most crucial things, if you're working as a team, and not just a musical theater team, but any team, is what is my strength? What is my goal? What is my job in this production? And it was not the choreographer, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking, oh, what should they do here? It wasn't my job. I didn't have to spend time thinking, what is the set going to look like? What is the costume? What's the blocking going to be? Because I was only really responsible for those actors and teaching them the songs and working that throughout the play, the musical, that was very helpful, that I wasn't responsible for everything. I've done little musicals with middle schoolers where I had to do everything. It's overwhelming. I was the choreographer. Sorry, Miss Jill. I probably stole some of your ideas. I was the set person. I was the costume. It was all that, and it's a lot. So to be able to have a team that you trust, who can fulfill their jobs, and allow me to work on my job and getting the music right, I think that is key. I think anybody who's going to branch out and try some musical theater directing needs to have a team of people that they trust who they don't have to worry about doing that job. They know they're going to do it.
Jill, like to add on?
I agree completely with Patty. I think what I think about in a musical is deferring to the guys and the guidance of the director and trying my best to stay in my lane, to offer what I can to bring the scene to life. I've walked in before when the lyrics are known, they're off book with script, the blocking has been set in a scene, and now it's time to move the actors. And so I take the music that Patty's pulled together or the lyrics of the song and try to bring energy and bring it to life, but I do want to stay in my lane. I've been told by a director, that's not really what I envisioned. And so we'll tweak it and try and bend and flex to get it to the end result. And I'm willing to do that. And I love collaboration as well. Like Patty, I've directed 4 or 5 big musicals and done the whole thing. And it is overwhelming. It's daunting. I do believe that the show is in the details. And so I love to just focus on the dance.
Well, Paulina, when you have a number of very talented and experienced people working together, there's going to be different visions or different opinions about things. And I hope that this is true of me. I'm going to say it as if it were, and I hope my friends will agree with this. But I think one of the most important things is having mutual respect for each other. So as Patty said, she knew she wasn't the choreographer. And I know I'm not, and I'm not a musical director and things like that. So you respect the team that you have around you and trust them to, lend their expertise to it. When there were differences of opinion about things, I think, second of all, you have to say, well, let's see if we can work this out. Let's, adapt, or how can we make this work? Because their ideas are great, and maybe the vision has to be redirected a little bit, in order to include those things. And I think all of us also learned to listen to our students. We didn't just listen to each other, but sometimes a student will have a great idea. And if it makes the production better, it doesn't matter whose idea it was, and so you long for that. And then I think maybe a third thing I would say is that you don't let the students see those disagreements. If you're working with a group of kids and you disagree on something, you don't want to battle those things out in their presence, but talk about that in private and resolve whatever the disagreement is, so that they don't have some sense that, there's disagreement among their directors. But ultimately, this was true in our relationship, I believe, and it should be true probably everywhere, that ultimately the director's job is to unify the vision. So you have all these different talents and ideas coming together, and they flow through the director's hood or his focus, and you try to unify those things. It was a famous actor named Terry Gilliam, who was the only American part of the Monty Python team, who apparently gave this advice to Quentin Tarantino some years ago. And it's been paraphrased by a number of others, but it's this idea of unifying the vision. And it's a wonderful thing when that happens.
Yeah, unifying the vision is important, especially when there's so many moving parts, and that requires a lot of communication, probably, I would assume. And so while y'all are working on the show and as it's evolving, what's good communication advice and practices to help the team stay aligned within these maybe disagreements or ideas? Patty?
One of the things I think, Mr. Ballard and I had it really nice because our rooms were right next to each other, so we could just pop in to the other room and say, what's going on? But just an advice for a director, one thing I think he did really well is, and this was good for the students, for the families, for the directors, is he would put out a week or two worth of scheduling practices, the rehearsals, and he would break it down by the actor, the scene, but also the page number. So the student can see on Monday, these pages are going to be done, and I'm either on that page or I'm not. And they would know exactly who needed to be there. And he would say, these people would be on stage, these people would be in music rehearsal, these will be in dance rehearsals. So we were not fighting over time with students. It was already laid out a week or two in advance, and the students knew, the parents knew, and so there was never really, occasionally somebody would need to be in more than one place at a time, but that kind of alleviated any kind of miscommunication before the rehearsal started in the week. So, but I think Mr. Ballard said it right. If there is I don't remember a lot of disagreements about issues. I'm trying to rack my brain thinking, when did we argue about anything? But I don't really remember that. I guess you just trust that your director has the vision and that he's going to do the right thing or she's going to do the right thing. And, talking about it, just having that good relationship before the show ever starts, was kind of a nice thing that we had. We worked all year together for 25 years, so we could pretty much know what the other was going to.
She would finish my sentences for me.
Yeah, pretty much. So, but yeah, I think communication ahead of the game, before rehearsals start, this is what we're going to be doing, this is what you can expect. And that helps directors, that helps students, helps families. So that's just one little aspect of it.
Jill, what's worked for you?
Another form of communication in the realm of musical theater for me over the years has been notes. And by that, I mean director's notes at the conclusion of a rehearsal. And I love that, where we all come back and sit out in the audience and notes are given, critiques, as they were, on this, that, or whatever might need to be changed or altered. Many times directors can give those notes privately to a lead, or if they need to speak with another director, we can be spoken to privately. But I will never forget being in a production of the musical Mame, and we ran the show. It was not at Brookhill, it was in a civic theater environment, but we ran the show for 2 weekends. And each evening we'd get out of costume and sit in the audience and take notes from the director. I was both choreographer and in the show. And he was an off-Broadway director. I loved working with him. But I will never forget the night that we closed the show and he gave notes. We came into the audience. There were still critiques. He always felt that there was a measure of leveling up. And so he gave us notes on closing night about the things that could have gone better. And I'll tell you, it was food for thought for the future. I still remember it to this day. And so I love the notes given by a director to just push that production forward and keep it leveling up each performance.
Did you ever think, I wish you had told me this last week?
Yes. Well, I probably, knowing me, had been told that last week, and I just had not corrected it. So, but I found it to be extremely helpful. And I know Glenn gives lots of great notes to his cast and actors as well.
Well, what I would add to that is that everything we did together was in the environment of educational theater as opposed to, professional theater. Nobody got a check for it. Jill, I'm sorry you haven't gotten your check yet. But, we were educators first and artists second. And so they both have touched on something that I'd wanted to touch on. The idea of scheduling was important, and it was, I thought it was an important way to communicate not just to the students, but to the parents and to each other. But there's a joke that goes around in theater, basically, that says, when you're doing your dress rehearsal, that's your first full run-through, the night before opening. And I did not want that to happen with our kids. I wanted them to feel confident, and I knew time gets away from you, and we had to schedule around all kinds of other school culture events and things like that. And the kids generally are busy. They've got, besides their homework and their social calendars, family things and church things that we encourage students to do. So anyway, being respectful of their time was important, and I think we worked together to do that. And then the idea of giving feedback, like Jill has talked about, telling the kids what your expectations are and how they can do better, I think was an important thing. And then the other thing I'd say is in communicating, it's very important to show grace, because sometimes I forgot. I mean, there were things, Patty's indicated that in our jobs there were a lot of things going on at times, and it was busy, and we were juggling things. And there were times I forgot, or overlooked something, or double scheduled, or something like that. And I needed people to be gracious and merciful towards me. And so I hope I learned over the years to be gracious towards others and to, just be respectful of that. And in any community theater situation, whether it's a student or whatever, there are families involved, and so whenever we got this schedule out that Patty mentioned, that was for the kids, but also moms and dads who were providing transportation and trying to schedule around their kids' events. But communication is a big part of any team endeavor.
Yeah, so whether it's through feedback or scheduling or just being patient with one another, it really seems like it holds, or the end product of a musical theater production really hangs on the communication of those involved. And so when you're collaborating with all types of performers, y'all have worked with students, how does the different degrees of experience of the students affect how you're able to take on your role and support one another while going through the process of a production? Patty?
We were very fortunate that we had, in our musical theater program, it was an open audition. And so it was done all after school and on Saturdays. And so that way we could open it up. There were many productions. We had our lower school littles all the way up through high schoolers. We even had some adults occasionally come in and play some roles for us, some special things. And I think that played to our advantage. We had some very experienced students who were always so gracious to help these younger ones, the inexperienced. They were, I think it was good for the inexperienced to see those older kids really work hard. You could always identify those who were leaders, and they were oftentimes showing the younger ones, no, we do this, we don't do that, let's go ahead and do this. And I think it kind of propelled those younger ones to work a little harder, to kind of come up to the level of some of those more experienced older kids. So I really liked having all levels of experience and talent. We had kids who had never been on stage before, and they just really took to it. And I can think of several examples of students who were very timid and very self-conscious, and by the time they were seniors, they were the lead. And it's just, that's pretty rewarding to see kids come through and just really take pride in something and learn something new, and just really blossom in that way.
That's a good word, blossom.
And Jill, when you have students from different levels of experience, how does leaning on other directors or collaborators help with that?
Well, it does help for sure. And I will say, as a choreographer, one of the biggest challenges is walking into a setting ready to put movement to a scene. And I find that the majority of the children or the students or the adults at times have had no movement, no studio classes. They don't know what steps are called. And so the challenge is to find their willingness. And if they are willing, I can work with willingness. And it amazes me how these kids, like Patty said, it's so rewarding to see if they'll just open up their minds and hearts to the possibility that I can do this, that we can, that we can make it happen. We take the musical score that a musical director like Patty has, the stage blocking, the direction that Glenn as a director might have set in place. And my challenge is to get the very young child or the high school kid with no confidence and no skill set to, accomplish something. And it's just absolutely fantastic. Our most recent production the production that I did with Glenn at Brook Hill was The King and I had 3 or 4 young high school girls who wanted so badly to be in the dance productions and to participate, but they spoke over and over again, I have no experience, I'm afraid, I don't think I can do it. And we got them up there with their willingness and put some steps to them, and they just took off and ran with it. And it was just, I just walk away from productions like that, and I'm just so grateful for the kids, young and old, that are just willing. And I think they walk away with a skill set that they didn't know they had and confidence.
That's good. Jill mentioned the idea of willingness, and I have always felt that I would rather have a student that has a good attitude over a lot of talent. I think any coach feels that way. If a student is teachable and willing to take your direction, you can do a lot more with that student than you can someone who has a lot of talent but think they know it all. So with regard to different levels of maturity and talent, I think the first thing we did was to identify the strengths and weaknesses of a student. And once you've done that, then in whether Jill was teaching dance or Patty was teaching music, you could help push them to the limits of their creativity and all that. But if a student was unable to achieve a certain thing, then we learned to adapt. One of my colleagues mentioned a while ago the idea of, I think, creative license or something to that effect. And so we do take liberties with the script or the music. You can, most publishers will allow you to change the key or change the tempo or do something if you need to so that a student can be successful. And so we never thought that they had to get there on their own, but those students that needed, either because of age or lack of experience, that needed some special attention, one of us would do that. So you have this dilemma sometimes. You have students who are willing but not able, and so you adapt to that and help them. But in those rare situations where we had a student who was able but not willing, the child with a difficult attitude or too large of an ego or was more concerned about themselves than they were the overall production, usually one of us had a relationship with that student. And we could take them aside and talk to them and help give them some guidance. Ultimately, if a student or one of your castmates is sabotaging, the endeavor, then usually it became the director's responsibility to talk with that student, give them some guidance, maybe involve the parents, and ultimately, if necessary, to remove that student. It's not a pleasant part of this situation, but there have been times when it was in the best interest of the production or the best interest of the other students to remove somebody who had a toxic, attitude or something like that. And while that's very unpleasant, sometimes that's necessary. And when you have the different degrees of talent, experience, and egos and all those things involved, usually we saw, if that was going to happen, we saw it in advance and addressed it before it, became ugly or disruptive. But attitude over talent any day.
So, can you guys each share a moment when collaborating led to a breakthrough or something that led to a stronger and better moment in your musical theater production and just like a really wow moment? Patty?
Okay, yes, I will. One that really stands out to me is when we did Elton John and Tim Rice's Aida. We did it in 2010, and I didn't love it just because Miss Jill and I had the leads of our children did. My daughter was Aida and her son was Radames. It just happened to be. But it's a remarkable show on its own. It's the music is just really wonderful. But we had a moment. It was a large cast in our performance space. If you have not been to old school Brook Hill before they built the new Soul Center, all our performances were in the cafeteria. So that stage is less than adequate space for a lot of what we wanted to do. And so if you think of something as big as Aida, you think there's no way that can be done. Of course, Mr. Ballard always comes up with the best sets to utilize every inch of that stage. And so he did. He built these platform steps that went along the width of the stage so that we could get those different levels and have some more space. So there was this one big number called Dance of the Robe, big, dramatic, emotional point of the show. We had a large cast. It needed big choreography. It needed big music, and we just didn't have the space with the students that we have. We couldn't get everybody in the down on the floor doing the choreography and dancing. Some of them couldn't dance and sing at the same time, so we had to figure out something. So one of us, probably Mr. Ballard, maybe Miss Jill, I don't know, decided let's take those students who are maybe not as adept at dancing and moving and singing at the same time. Let's put them up on the steps, and they will sing full voice and do motions from the waist up. And let's let those a little more experienced dancers be out front, so we can see them, we can see their face, we can see their motions, we can see their costumes, and we still get the best of all worlds. Everybody has the space to move, but we still get the spectacle of that big number. And so that really, because I remember watching that going, this is not going to work. There's no way all these people can be on the stage singing and dancing. We're losing a lot of this. And so that was really such a great problem in the moment to be able to fix. And so it turned out to be a very, very emotional and dramatic place in the show that is very memorable, for at least for me.
I bet that was such a good moment to watch.
was.
I wish I had been there to see that. But Jill, what's a memory or moment that stands out for
Well,
you?
I have one in the same show. It was Aida. And this was a scene where all of the actors, the young men, were off book on their script, and music was learned, and Glenn had done the blocking for the scene. My son played the part of Radames. I'd never directed or coached him in this kind of environment before. And I'm wondering to myself as I approach the choreography session, is he going to be coachable, teachable, willing to work with me or for me? And as I saw the blocking and the music was moving, I felt that the scene needed energy. We needed to really, insert some energy in the scene. So rather than strolling on, walking on among these soldiers and the swords and all the things that they had, I asked my son to run onto the stage and leap up onto a prop and really move quickly, almost running from stage right to stage left to kind of bring that energy up. And it was pivotal for me because he took direction very well and he did it. But what I loved most was that in regard to collaboration, I felt that like his peers and those other actors on stage collaborated with him and with me to really embolden the scene and give it that big punch to set the tone. And it was just in like a matter of 30 or 45 minutes to me, that whole scene had changed, and I was pleased. I'm hopeful that Glenn was pleased with it. I felt that those young men did a fantastic job, and they just continued to grow it as our rehearsal processes went along.
It's true. So I want to go back to this idea of educational theater because Patty and Jill and I worked with students, and most of them, they might have been in choir and had some experience singing. They might have been in my drama class and learned a little bit about character voices and things, but most of them had very little experience in taking dance instruction or choreography. So for me, one of the most neat things was to see these kids. Some of them were athletes, who had come to us, and Jill could take them and create poetry in motion, quite literally. And so the scene Patty mentioned, there were several in Aida that are in my memory, but I'll mention the one from Mary Poppins. We did choose to do some literature that most schools don't ever attempt. And in Mary Poppins, there's this big rooftop scene where they sing Step in Time and all the chimney sweeps are out dancing. And she was able to turn those kids into a team of dancers that, created something very powerful. And visually, it just really helped tell the story in a very special way. And we didn't have the engineering in the cafetorium that Patty mentioned to have Bert, walk upside down around the proscenium like they do on Broadway. So how do you make it come together? The audience is expecting something. They've seen it, the movie, or they've seen it on Broadway, and they're expecting something way out of the ordinary. And we were able to do that with kids in a venue that was not really meant for that. Two other ones real quickly I'll mention. We did Little Women a few years ago, and one of our students was Lydia Middleton. And there's a scene in Little Women where Joe and Beth March are on the beach alone together, and it foreshadows Beth's untimely death from sickness a short time after. And Lydia choreographed a moment, a ballet sequence that happened around Joe and Beth involving a kite. And that particular show of ours was entered in the Dallas Summer Musical's High School Musical Theater Awards. And so we had a group of judges that came to see the show, and one of them afterwards we actually got 3 nominations, by the way. But anyway, so one of the judges said that dance sequence was one of the best ones she had ever seen in her career. And so when you have experts come and watch the work and make comments like that, it's just very rewarding. And then in our most recent production, Jill mentioned The King and I, there's a massive ballet sequence in that takes up a good part of Act 2. And I had numbers of patrons who left the theater and said to me afterwards, that ballet was worth the price of a ticket. They said, I would like to come back and watch the show just because of that. And so, I think we all have memories of great, great moments. And it's gratifying to us as artists and as teachers that we were able to bring it together. But the most special thing is to see the look on the kids' faces and their parents when they realize how successful they were.
And you guys have great moments of collaboration and being musical theater leaders. I'm sure many who are watching this are looking to be able to bring that to their own theaters. What's some advice, or at least a habit or mindset, you would recommend to directors or musical directors or choreographers to take as they step into these roles, or if they're looking to be better at what they're doing, or just make some improvements? Patty?
I think first of all, dream big. And we were talking about this earlier, there were a few times Mr. Ballard picked some shows. Aida would have been one of them that I thought, there's no way we could do those. We can't possibly do those. And of course we did. And they were some of my very favorites that we ever did, and I think our patrons as well. So dream big. Number 2 is know your skill set, know your capabilities. What's available to you as far as space and scripts and music and musicians? What do you have available to you? Another thing is who are you going to involve? Who are your students, or who are your actors? What do you have? Do you have 20 boys? Maybe do Newsies. If you have 40 girls and 2 boys, maybe don't do Newsies. So you've got to, the director always choosing that literature has to look at who do you have that are going to be involved, and what can you do, and then dream big. I think it's worth the risk.
Jill?
Well, I think I agree with Patty 100%. I think another thing that comes to mind in training students to maybe move forward in leadership, or others, even like myself as a dancer initially, to move into other leadership roles in musical theater, is to kind of lean on that mantra of the triple threat. I have had so many kids in theater that I've worked with, and or adults in civic theater. They can sing, or they're great actors. They've had, they can really emote and do the part, but maybe they can't dance. So as we move along and we work with kids, students, adults who might want to, hold the mantle of directorship or collaboration in musical theater, you have to know a little bit about all of it. You need to know what it requires to be a stage manager, to run the sound booth. You need to know how to look at a script. You need to know how to edit music if it's too long, if it doesn't fit your show. And I have currently a young man that's in Florida, and he's performing in Cats. And he came to the studio as a junior in high school. He had two of the elements of the triple threat. He could act and he could sing, but he couldn't dance. So he joined the studio as a junior in high school to learn how to move, and it's taken him forward. And so now he's in a position of performance, and I can see him ultimately getting into a role of leadership or artistic leadership in the realm of musical theater because he has that triple threat and he's experienced some of all of it. So it's really critical to educate yourself.
Great points. Some of what I'll say is probably will sound repetitious, but Patty was spot on when she said you select literature that fits your students. And so any good coach knows that you pick an offense or a defense based upon the kids you have and don't. I saw, in fact, just a video clip on Instagram yesterday where a team decided to let their center, who weighed about 320 pounds, play defensive cornerback on a play. And it was comical to see him try to keep up with the receiver. It wasn't possible. And the same kind of thing can happen on the stage if you select students and literature that don't fit. So anyway, that's one thing I would say. The second thing probably is that you do have to spend a lot of time outside of rehearsal in preparation for those rehearsals. I would challenge Jill and Patty and others I've worked with to have a game plan. When you come into rehearsal, don't just do it by the seat of your pants, even though you have a lot of experience in those things, but have a structured game plan of what you're going to accomplish on that day and be prepared. The students can tell when you're not prepared, I think. And sometimes that happens, but you don't want it to happen on a regular basis. And I guess maybe the thing I would say as much as anything is work harder than anybody else. You're going to ask your students to work hard and you ask your colleagues to work hard, and you need to be an example of a work ethic, that says you're willing to put in the time and the energy and whatever sacrifices are necessary to help those students be successful. And every director and musical director and choreographer and everybody has a life outside of the stage. And so you have to be respectful of that time. But I would say, along with Patty, dream big and work hard to get there. And all of us are believers. We're not ashamed to acknowledge that we're believers. And so God gets the glory. And Patty knows my favorite Bible verse is the one in Colossians that says, whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord. So if you're going to be a leader as an educator or an artist, make sure you put your heart into it.
Wow, that is just amazing. And I think we've all really learned a lot today about what just really goes into a musical theater production. So much collaboration, and that includes respect for your collaborators and your students, and also keeping good communication, I would say, and also that feedback we talked about too. Just so much to take away from today's episode. And before we end this off, is there anything you guys would like to add as a last comment about musical theater and collaboration? Patty?
I just think it's one of the most valuable things a student can be a part of. Thinking back, you were talking about, Mr. Ballard, about the chimney sweeps in Mary Poppins, and I would say a good majority of those guys were athletes. We were very fortunate to have a lot of athletes in our program.
We did a lot of recruiting, didn't we?
We did a lot of well, I was going to say those boys, a bunch of those boys had been in some of our productions before, and they really didn't want to do it again. It's so much time, and it really is. They had other things they were doing, and I remember stopping a couple of them out in the parking lot on the way to basketball practice or something and said, here's the deal. We would like you to be a part of our production of Mary Poppins. We're going to have you be the chimney sweeps, which just is maybe 1 or 2 scenes. It's very fun and active, and you get to sing and dance. Would you do it? And they said, is that all it's going to be? And I said, I promise it is. And so we recruited those athletic boys, and they did big kicks off the steps and danced and just had a great time. And it was, just involving all those different students was a lot of fun.
And quite a few of them would say, man, Miss Jill's choreography rehearsals are tougher than any football practice we've been in.
They did.
Oh, my.
They loved it, though. It kind of gave them that creative outlet, just to be able to do something fun and different, and all their friends in the audience cheering them on. It was pretty special, though, I think.
I want to piggyback on that real quickly about this idea of recruiting. The ladies have mentioned that when we did AIDA in 2010, we had a phenomenal AIDA, Erica Eden-Matei, first-class vocalist and everything, but also an athlete. But at the time, I picked the show because of Erica and a few supporting players we had lined up behind her, but we didn't have someone to play the male lead of Rhodomace. And Jill's son, Preston, was in the choir, and as it happens, he and Erica were dating at the time. And so I said to Preston one day, I said, there's really a neat love scene in this show, and I'm going to have Erica kissing another boy. And he said, all right, I'll do it. And he kind of agreed. So was that recruitment or was that arm twisting? I don't know.
I don't know.
But it worked.
But we did work around his golf schedule.
Well,
So.
I will say on that note, I'll segue from Preston to my other children. I have 3 sons, which, God has such a lovely sense of humor. I'm a dance teacher with 3 sons. But as I directed plays along the way, I was teaching dance classes and staging dance recitals and the ticket sales and all these things. My boys would always be kind of hoodwinked into helping us with these productions. But more than that, I would say just exposing my 3 sons and my husband to the arts, going to the musicals, going to the state fair musicals in the summer, and in choir, and allowing them to be in band programs and such and so forth, and giving them that education or exposure at the time to the arts is just critical. I think it creates great appreciation for the arts. I think it lets them know and others know it is an art form. It's difficult. It's not easy. And I think that as young married men now with families, they can sew that artistic thread into their families and take them to musicals and choir programs and get their children into dance classes and these kind of things. So I think that's really, really critical, and I'm a big believer in education of the arts. As a matter of fact, my oldest son now is sitting on the board, as I understand, with Glenn at the Young Audiences of Northeast Texas, and I'm very grateful that he gave Aaron that invitation, and I know that Aaron will enjoy because he loves the arts.
One more thing, if I could add to that, is that there's a place for everybody. And one of the things we noticed, you might have somebody who could really sing well, but they couldn't dance. There's a place. Or somebody who could be a featured dancer but didn't want to sing. And then, of course, you have the overall hams who can act and sing and have the triple threat. But we like to refer to musical theater as the ultimate team sport. And it really did make a place. We were able to do this in our collaboration, make a place for everybody. And it may have not ended up being the place they thought they wanted, but we helped them be successful in that role, and they were part of a great team. So go for it.
Well, thank you guys. I can't thank you enough to our guests, Patty, Jill, and Glenn, for joining us today on Arts for Learning about this conversation about musical theater and collaboration. I feel like I learned so much about what goes into a production, and I hope everyone at home did as well. Thank you guys once more for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was so wonderful to talk to you, and we'll see y'all next time.